Have you ever wondered what it would be like to walk into a room and completely shatter the assumptions people make about you? Imagine stepping into one of the most powerful banks in the city, not as just another customer, but as someone who's about to expose the ugly truth hiding behind its polished doors. This is a story of courage, justice, and transformation, one that will leave you questioning how far we've really come in the fight for equality. But before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and join us on this journey. Trust me, you won't want to miss where this story goes. Let's get started. It was a crisp Monday morning in downtown Chicago. The sun filtered through the towering glass windows of Riverstone Bank, casting long shadows across its marble floors. Angela Carter stepped inside, her modest gray blazer and simple black slacks blending seamlessly with the sea of customers. She carried herself with quiet confidence, but there was something about her presence, a subtle energy that made people glance twice, even if they didn't quite know why. Angela had always been good at reading rooms. It came from years of navigating spaces where she wasn't expected to belong. As she approached the waiting area, she took it all in, the polished counters, the gleaming brass nameplates on desks, and the carefully curated art pieces lining the walls. This was Riverstone Bank, one of the most prestigious financial institutions in the city. And today, she was here to see how things really worked behind the scenes. She sat down on one of the leather chairs near the entrance, pretending to scroll through her phone while keeping an eye on the interactions around her. That's when she saw him, Greg Anderson. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, he strode into the bank like he owned the place. His slick back hair and Rolex screamed success, and sure enough, within seconds, a young banker rushed over to greet him. "Mr. Anderson." "Right this way, sir," the banker said, his voice dripping with enthusiasm. He led Greg toward a private office at the back, bypassing the line of customers who were still waiting patiently, or not so patiently, for their turn. Angela watched as Greg disappeared behind frosted glass doors labeled VIP Clients Only. She shook her head slightly, her lips pressing into a thin line. It wasn't surprising, but it stung every time she saw it happen. People like Greg got treated like royalty, no questions asked. Meanwhile, others weren't so lucky. Take Luis Ramirez, for example. A few minutes later, a man in his early 30s walked up to the counter. He wore a crisp button-down shirt and carried a folder filled with documents. Luis introduced himself politely, explaining that he wanted to open a business account for his construction company. But instead of being greeted warmly, the teller gave him a skeptical look and started firing off questions. "Can you provide proof of income for the past 6 months?" the teller asked, her tone clipped. "I've brought all the necessary paperwork," Luis replied calmly, sliding the folder across the counter. "And what about your credit score?" she pressed, barely glancing at the documents. "It's excellent," Luis said, his patience starting to wear thin. "You can verify it yourself." Angela could see the frustration building in his eyes. She knew that look, it was the same one she'd seen countless times before, both in others and in herself. The feeling of having to prove yourself 10 times over just because of the color of your skin or the sound of your last name. As Luis continued to navigate the barrage of unnecessary questions, another interaction caught Angela's attention. Across the room, Sarah Jennings stood nervously clutching her purse. She was a single mother in her mid-30s, her tired eyes betraying the weight of responsibilities far heavier than her petite frame should have to carry. When she finally reached the front of the line, the teller barely acknowledged her. "How may I assist you today?" the teller muttered without looking up from her screen. Sarah hesitated, clearly intimidated by the cold reception. "I need help setting up a savings plan. For my daughter's college fund." The teller sighed audibly, tapping her pen against the desk. "Do you even have a stable income? These plans require a minimum deposit." Sarah flushed red, her hands trembling as she fumbled for her paycheck stub. "Yes, I do. I work 2 jobs." I just want to make sure she has a better future." Angela clenched her fists under the table. She wanted to step in, to say something, to remind these employees that everyone deserved respect, regardless of their background or circumstances. But she couldn't. Not yet. Today wasn't about confrontation, it was about observation. About gathering evidence. Because Angela Carter wasn't just another customer. She was the undercover CEO of Riverstone Bank. Her mind drifted back to her own journey, years ago, when she first entered the world of finance. Angela had started as a teller, fresh out of college with big dreams but little support. Back then, she'd faced her fair share of discrimination. Her colleagues would often dismiss her ideas during meetings, assuming she didn't understand the complexities of banking because she was young and black. Clients would sometimes ask to speak to someone more experienced, implying that her gender and race somehow disqualified her from competence. But Angela hadn't let them break her spirit. If anything, their doubts fueled her determination. She worked twice as hard, stayed late every night, and eventually earned promotions that silenced her critics. Now, after decades of climbing the corporate ladder, she found herself at the top, but with power came responsibility. And Angela wasn't about to let Riverstone perpetuate the same biases she'd fought so hard to overcome. Back in the present, she noticed a young intern approaching her. "Ma'am, are you here for an appointment?" he asked hesitantly. "No," Angela replied with a small smile. "Just observing." The intern frowned but didn't press further. Instead, he scurried away, leaving Angela alone with her thoughts once more. The clock ticked on, and the scene unfolded exactly as Angela feared. Wealthy clients received preferential treatment, while those from marginalized communities struggled to be taken seriously. Each interaction reinforced the systemic issues plaguing not just Riverstone Bank, but the entire industry. And though Angela kept her expression neutral, her heart ached for the people being dismissed, doubted, and disrespected right before her eyes. By the time 5 minutes had passed, Angela knew what she had to do. This wasn't just about fixing a broken system, it was about restoring faith in the idea that everyone deserved a fair chance. No matter who they were or where they came from. 5 minutes had passed since Angela Carter entered Riverstone Bank, and the tension in the air was palpable. She rose from her seat, smoothing out her blazer as she approached the counter. The marble floor clicked softly under her heels, each step deliberate yet unhurried. Her gaze swept across the room one last time before she stopped at an open teller station. "Good morning," Angela said warmly, offering a polite smile to the young woman behind the counter. Beth Simmons looked up, startled by the sudden presence of someone who seemed so composed amidst the chaos of the bank. Beth couldn't have been older than 25, with wide, uncertain eyes that darted nervously between Angela and the stack of papers in front of her. "I'd like to make a withdrawal," Angela continued, sliding her ID and account information across the counter. $115,000. Beth froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. For a moment, there was complete silence, just the faint hum of fluorescent lights above them. Then, without missing a beat, Beth forced a tight smile. "Of course, ma'am. Let me just verify your account details." But Angela could see the hesitation in Beth's movements, the way her hands trembled slightly as she typed. It wasn't hard to guess what was coming next. Sure enough, after a few seconds of fumbling, Beth excused herself quietly and disappeared into the back office. Angela didn't need to follow her to know exactly whom she was calling for backup. A minute later, Mark Reynolds appeared. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed beard and an air of authority that bordered on arrogance. As the senior loan officer, Mark prided himself on being the gatekeeper of Riverstone's wealthier clients. His sharp navy suit and gold cufflinks screamed success, or at least the illusion of it. "What seems to be the issue here?" Mark asked, his tone clipped as he glanced down at Angela. His eyes flicked dismissively over her modest attire before landing on the withdrawal slip in Beth's hand. "Ah, I see. A large sum." "It's my money," Angela replied evenly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I'm entitled to withdraw it whenever I please." Mark raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Yes, well, we have protocols in place for such requests. Especially when they involve unusual amounts." The emphasis on unusual wasn't subtle. Angela recognized the microaggression immediately, the implication that someone like her wouldn't normally handle sums this size. Before she could respond, Richard Evans chimed in from across the room. Richard was the head of client relations, a man known for his charm, but only when it suited him. Today, his tone carried a mocking edge. "You sure you're not trying to pull a fast one on us?" he quipped, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "We don't want any troublemakers around here." Angela clenched her jaw but kept her composure. She'd dealt with men like Richard before, men who used humor as a weapon, cloaking their prejudice in thinly veiled insults. Still, his words stung more than she cared to admit. The situation escalated further when Jessica Turner, the branch manager, arrived. Dressed in a pristine white blouse and black pencil skirt, Jessica exuded professionalism, but there was something cold about her demeanor. Her lips curved into a practiced smile as she addressed Angela, though her tone betrayed thinly veiled condescension. "Ms. Carter, is it?" Jessica began, glancing briefly at Angela's ID before setting it aside. "I understand you're requesting a substantial withdrawal. Could you explain the purpose of this transaction?" Angela resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Did they ask Greg Anderson why he needed access to his funds? Or Luis Ramirez, for that matter? Somehow, she doubted it. Instead, she answered calmly, "It's for personal use. As I mentioned earlier, it's my money." Jessica tilted her head, feigning concern. "Well, Ms. Carter, while we respect your right to manage your finances, we also have a responsibility to ensure our clients aren't making decisions they might regret. Perhaps you'd like to discuss this further in private?" The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. Angela knew what they were doing, trying to isolate her, intimidate her, make her doubt herself. But she refused to give them the satisfaction. Instead, she stood her ground, maintaining eye contact with Jessica as she spoke. "There's no need for privacy," Angela said firmly. "Unless, of course, you're implying that I'm incapable of managing my own affairs." For a split second, Jessica faltered. But then she recovered, plastering another fake smile onto her face. "Not at all, Ms. Carter. We're simply following procedure." As the standoff continued, Angela's mind drifted back to moments in her career when she'd faced similar humiliations. She remembered the first time she'd pitched an idea during a board meeting, only to be met with blank stares and awkward silence. One executive had even leaned over to whisper, "Maybe stick to simpler tasks, Angela." Another memory surfaced, a client refusing to shake her hand because, as he put it, "I prefer dealing with people who look the part." Each recollection fueled her resolve. Those experiences hadn't broken her, they'd made her stronger. And now, standing in the middle of Riverstone Bank, surrounded by judgmental faces and condescending remarks, Angela felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about her, it was about every person who'd ever been made to feel small, insignificant, or unworthy because of their race, gender, or background. Richard cleared his throat, breaking the tense silence. "Look, Ms. Carter," he said, leaning casually against the counter, "we're not accusing you of anything. But let's be honest, this isn't exactly typical behavior for someone in your position." Angela stiffened. "My position?" she echoed, her voice dangerously calm. "And what, exactly, do you think my position is?" Richard smirked, clearly enjoying himself. "No offense, but you don't exactly scream, high-net-worth individual. Maybe reconsider how you're presenting yourself next time." The room fell silent. Even the other customers paused, sensing the weight of the moment. Angela took a deep breath, steadying herself. She could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface, but she pushed it down. Losing her temper wouldn't help anyone. Not now. Instead, she smiled, a slow, enigmatic curve of her lips that sent a shiver down Jessica's spine. "You're right," Angela said softly. "Maybe I should reconsider how I present myself. After all, appearances can be deceiving, can't they?" With that, she turned on her heel and walked toward the exit, leaving behind a stunned group of employees and customers. Outside, the crisp autumn breeze greeted her like an old friend. Angela allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Phase 1 of her plan was complete. Now, it was time to show Riverstone Bank, and everyone else, exactly who she was. The tension inside Riverstone Bank reached a boiling point as Angela stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated. Jessica Turner leaned closer, her polished smile beginning to crack under the strain of maintaining her facade. Her voice dropped an octave, laced with thinly veiled suspicion. "Ms. Carter," Jessica said, her tone clipped, "I must ask, where did you acquire this amount of money? It's not every day we see withdrawals of this size from, well, someone in your position." Angela's jaw tightened at the implication, but she kept her composure. She tilted her head slightly, her dark eyes locking onto Jessica's. "Are you questioning the legitimacy of my funds?" she asked calmly, her voice carrying just enough weight to make Jessica hesitate. Before Jessica could respond, Mark Reynolds stepped forward, his arms crossed over his chest like a bouncer ready to eject a troublemaker. "Let's cut to the chase," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "We need to verify your identity and ensure everything is above board." "Standard procedure, of course." Angela didn't miss the way Mark emphasized standard procedure. She knew exactly what he meant. It wasn't standard at all. It was another layer of scrutiny reserved for people who didn't fit their idea of a typical, high-net-worth client. Richard Evans chimed in again, unable to resist adding fuel to the fire. "You know, Miss Carter," he drawled, his smirk widening, "if you're struggling financially, there are resources available. Maybe we can connect you with one of our financial advisors?" His words hung in the air, heavy with insinuation. The nearby customers shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding eye contact while others exchanged uneasy glances. One man, a middle-aged white customer dressed in a pressed suit, finally spoke up, his voice sharp with impatience. "Look, lady," he snapped, glaring at Angela. "If you don't have your paperwork in order, maybe you should step aside and let the rest of us get on with our business. Some of us actually have important things to do." Angela turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she considered responding, but instead, she simply nodded, letting the insult slide off her like water off glass. She'd learned long ago that engaging with ignorance only gave it power. Instead, she focused her attention back on Jessica, whose discomfort was becoming more apparent by the second. But before Jessica could say anything further, Thomas Walker, the burly security guard, appeared beside her. His presence loomed large, his uniform crisp and his posture rigid. He glanced at Angela with a mixture of curiosity and disdain, clearly following orders rather than exercising independent thought. "Ma'am," Thomas said gruffly, his deep voice echoing through the tense silence of the bank, "I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. We need to resolve this matter privately." Angela raised an eyebrow, her calm demeanor unshaken. "Am I being detained?" she asked pointedly, her voice steady. Thomas hesitated, glancing at Jessica for guidance. Jessica cleared her throat, clearly flustered. "No, of course not," she stammered. "We just want to ensure everything is handled appropriately." At that moment, an elderly woman seated nearby rose from her chair. Mrs. Thompson, a frail yet fiery figure with silver hair and glasses perched on the edge of her nose, stepped forward, leaning heavily on her cane. Her voice trembled with indignation as she addressed the group. This is ridiculous," Mrs. Thompson exclaimed, her gaze sweeping across the staff. "I've been coming to this bank for 30 years, and I've never seen such blatant discrimination. Leave the poor woman alone." Jessica forced a tight-lipped smile, attempting to placate the older woman. "Mrs. Thompson, please, this is a delicate situation. We're simply doing our job." "A delicate situation?" Mrs. Thompson shot back, her voice rising. "What's delicate about treating someone differently because of how they look? You should be ashamed of yourselves." The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Even the impatient man in the suit seemed momentarily taken aback by Mrs. Thompson's outburst. But the staff quickly recovered, dismissing her protest with practiced indifference. "Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Thompson," Jessica said coolly, turning away. "We'll handle this internally." Mrs. Thompson huffed, shaking her head in disbelief as she shuffled back to her seat. Meanwhile, Angela seized the opportunity to subtly pull out her phone. With deft movements, she activated the recording app, ensuring the camera was hidden from view. Every word, every glance, every loaded comment would be documented. For now, she waited patiently for the perfect moment to reveal her true intentions. As the standoff continued, Richard decided to escalate matters further. He leaned against the counter, his smirk returning. "You know, Angela," he said, deliberately using her first name without permission, "if you really are who you say you are, then proving it shouldn't be a problem. Unless," he trailed off, leaving the insinuation hanging in the air. Angela's lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes remained cold. "Unless what, Mr. Evans?" she asked softly, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Unless you assume I couldn't possibly belong here?" Richard opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, Angela straightened her posture, her presence commanding the room once more. "Let me make something very clear," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "I am not leaving until this withdrawal is processed. And if anyone attempts to interfere, rest assured, the consequences will be severe." Her words sent a ripple through the crowd. The staff exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to proceed. Even Thomas shifted uncomfortably, his earlier bravado fading. Angela had planted the seed of doubt, and now, all she needed to do was wait for it to take root. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the glass doors of the bank. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension, each second stretching longer than the last. Angela exhaled slowly, her heart pounding but her resolve unwavering. She had walked into Riverstone Bank knowing the risks, and now, she was ready to show them exactly who they were dealing with. The tension in Riverstone Bank was suffocating. Angela stood at the center of it all, her calm demeanor masking the storm brewing beneath the surface. Jessica Turner and Richard Evans exchanged smug glances, convinced they had cornered her into submission. But Angela knew something they didn't, she held all the cards. With a subtle movement, she pulled out her phone again, this time dialing a number that would change everything. As the call connected, she pressed the speaker button, letting the sound of ringing fill the tense silence of the bank. Everyone froze, their eyes darting between Angela and the phone as if expecting some grand reveal. "Hello?" came a crisp, authoritative voice on the other end. It was Diane Porter, Executive Vice President of Riverstone Bank, a name that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned executives. "Diane," Angela said smoothly, her tone betraying none of the satisfaction bubbling within her. "It's Angela Carter. I'm currently at the downtown branch, and there's been an issue." The room erupted into murmurs. Jessica's face paled, while Richard snorted derisively. "Oh, come on," he muttered under his breath, though loud enough for Angela to hear. "What kind of game are you playing now?" Angela ignored him, focusing instead on Diane's response. "Angela? Is everything all right?" Diane asked, her voice sharp with concern. She already sensed the gravity of the situation. "I'm afraid not," Angela replied, her voice steady. There have been serious allegations of discriminatory practices here today. I've recorded the entire interaction, and I believe corporate oversight is necessary immediately. Richard laughed outright, shaking his head in disbelief. You really think anyone's buying this act? Who are you supposed to be calling, anyway? The CEO? Angela's lips curved into a faint smile, one that sent chills through the room. Actually, yes, she said softly, her gaze locking onto Richard's. I am the CEO. For a moment, no one moved. The air seemed to freeze, thick with shock and disbelief. Then, chaos erupted. Jessica stammered, trying to regain control of the situation. Wait, that's impossible. You can't just. But before she could finish, Diane's voice cut through the commotion like a knife. Enough, she barked, her tone leaving no room for argument. I'll be there within 10 minutes with legal and HR teams. Until then, everyone stays put. Do I make myself clear? The weight of Diane's authority silenced the room instantly. Even Thomas, the security guard, took a step back, unsure what to do next. Meanwhile, Angela slipped her phone back into her pocket, her expression unreadable but undeniably triumphant. At the same time, miles away at Riverstone Bank headquarters, Jonathan Prescott, the chairman of the board, sat in his opulent office reviewing quarterly reports. His assistant burst in without knocking, holding a tablet displaying live security footage from the downtown branch. Sir, you need to see this, the assistant said urgently, placing the tablet on Jonathan's desk. The screen showed Angela standing calmly amidst a group of visibly shaken employees, her presence commanding despite her modest appearance. Jonathan frowned, leaning closer to study the footage. Who is that woman? He asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. That's Angela Carter, his assistant replied, her tone trembling slightly. She's the undercover CEO. Jonathan's eyes widened as realization dawned. He grabbed the tablet, scrolling through additional clips showing the discriminatory treatment of customers earlier that day. Luis Ramirez being interrogated about his finances. Sarah Jennings dismissed with thinly veiled contempt. And now, Angela herself subjected to blatant bias and condescension. This is unacceptable, Jonathan growled, slamming his fist on the desk. Get Diane on the line. Tell her to handle this personally, and fast. We cannot afford a scandal like this. Back at the branch, the atmosphere grew increasingly volatile. Richard tried to salvage the situation by doubling down on his mockery. Even if you're telling the truth, he sneered, what does it matter? People like you don't last long in positions of power anyway. Angela's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, piercing glare. People like me, she echoed, her voice low and dangerous. You mean people who refuse to tolerate prejudice and incompetence? Because trust me, Mr. Evans, I intend to clean house, and you won't like where the broom starts. Before Richard could respond, the glass doors of the bank swung open dramatically. Diane Porter strode in, flanked by members of the legal and HR departments. Her tailored suit and commanding presence demanded immediate attention. Behind her trailed several executives clutching clipboards and tablets, ready to document every detail. Good afternoon, Diane announced, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. I am Diane Porter, Executive Vice President of Riverstone Bank. Effective immediately, this branch is under investigation for discriminatory practices. All staff members will remain on site until further notice. Jessica blanched, her polished facade crumbling under the weight of Diane's announcement. But this has to be a misunderstanding, she protested weakly, glancing around for support. None came. Diane ignored her, turning her attention to Angela. Ms. Carter, she said respectfully, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Rest assured, appropriate measures will be taken. Angela nodded curtly, her expression softening slightly. Thank you, Diane. I trust you'll ensure justice is served. As Diane began directing her team to interview witnesses and review security footage, Angela stepped aside, watching the scene unfold with quiet satisfaction. For years, she had fought against systems designed to keep people like her down. Now, she was dismantling those systems, one biased employee at a time. Outside, the wind carried the promise of change. Inside, the walls of Riverstone Bank trembled under the weight of accountability. Angela Carter had revealed herself, not just as the CEO, but as a force to be reckoned with. The air inside Riverstone Bank was electric with tension as Diane Porter took charge. Her presence transformed the room from a chaotic mess into an arena of accountability. With every step she took toward the center of the lobby, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, the staff seemed to shrink under her piercing gaze. "Everyone," Diane announced, her voice firm and authoritative, "this is now an official investigation. Legal and HR teams will conduct interviews immediately. Any attempt to interfere or withhold information will result in immediate termination." Her words sent shockwaves through the room. Jessica Turner, who had been clinging to the remnants of her composure, suddenly found herself crumbling. Her polished exterior cracked like thin ice over deep water, revealing the panic beneath. "This isn't fair," Jessica blurted out, her voice trembling. She stepped forward, her hands gesturing wildly as if trying to physically push back against the tide of consequences rushing toward her. "I was just following protocol. You can't blame me for doing my job." Diane raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by the outburst. "Following protocol," she repeated, her tone icy. "Let's be clear, Ms. Turner. Discrimination disguised as protocol is still discrimination, and it has no place at Riverstone Bank." Jessica's face flushed red, her desperation mounting. "But I didn't mean any harm. I was only asking questions because," her voice trailed off as she realized how feeble her excuses sounded even to her own ears. Angela watched silently from the sidelines, her arms crossed over her chest. She didn't need to say a word, her mere presence served as a reminder of the injustice that had unfolded. Every glance Jessica threw her way was met with Angela's unwavering stare, a silent testament to years of resilience in the face of prejudice. Meanwhile, Beth Simmons, the young teller who had initially hesitated when processing Angela's withdrawal, stood frozen near the counter. Her wide eyes darted between Diane, Angela, and the rest of the staff, torn between fear and guilt. Finally, unable to bear the weight of silence any longer, she broke down. "I'm so sorry," Beth whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't want to call Mark or involve anyone else, but they made me. They told me to flag anything unusual." She turned to Angela, her voice breaking. "It wasn't personal, I swear. But this happens all the time here. People are treated differently based on how they look, what they wear, where they come from." Beth's confession hung heavy in the air, a raw admission of systemic bias that left everyone stunned. Even those customers still lingering in the bank exchanged uneasy glances, some nodding in quiet agreement while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Diane nodded solemnly, jotting notes on her tablet. "Thank you for your honesty, Ms. Simmons," she said gently. "Your testimony will be crucial in addressing these issues." As Beth retreated to a corner, sobbing quietly, Diane signaled for one of the HR representatives to escort her away for further questioning. The room grew quieter, the gravity of the situation sinking in. No one dared speak, not even Richard Evans, whose usual arrogance had evaporated entirely. It was then that Jonathan Prescott, chairman of the board, arrived alongside two other senior board members. Their entrance was nothing short of dramatic, each stride radiating power and authority. Jonathan's sharp suit and commanding posture demanded immediate attention, and the staff scrambled to compose themselves as he approached. "What is going on here?" Jonathan barked, his voice cutting through the oppressive silence. His steely gaze swept across the room, landing briefly on Angela before shifting to Diane. "Diane, give me a status update." Diane stepped forward, handing him a tablet displaying security footage from earlier that day. "Sir, we've uncovered significant evidence of discriminatory practices within this branch," she explained crisply. The CEO herself, she gestured toward Angela, was subjected to blatant bias during her visit today. Additionally, multiple customer interactions reveal consistent patterns of racial and socio-economic prejudice. Jonathan's jaw tightened as he reviewed the footage. The camera captured everything: Luis Ramirez being grilled about his finances, Sarah Jennings dismissed with thinly veiled contempt, and Angela enduring condescending remarks from nearly every staff member present. Each frame painted a damning picture of institutionalized discrimination. "This is unacceptable," Jonathan growled, slamming the tablet onto the nearest counter. "Riverstone Bank prides itself on integrity and inclusivity. This behavior tarnishes our reputation, and it ends now." His declaration sparked a flurry of activity. The legal team began confiscating employee phones and accessing internal communications, searching for additional evidence of misconduct. Meanwhile, the HR representatives conducted individual interviews, documenting testimonies from both staff and customers. Jessica, desperate to salvage her career, attempted one final plea. "Mr. Prescott, please, you have to understand. I was just doing what I thought was best for the bank. I never intended to hurt anyone." Jonathan fixed her with a cold glare. "Intentions don't matter, Miss Turner. Outcomes do. And the outcome of your actions is clear: harm was done. To our clients, to our reputation, and to the values we claim to uphold." Defeated, Jessica slumped into a nearby chair, burying her face in her hands. Around her, other employees exchanged nervous glances, realizing the full extent of the fallout they were about to face. Angela finally stepped forward, her voice steady and resolute. "This isn't just about punishing individuals," she said, addressing the entire room. "It's about dismantling the systems that allow such biases to thrive. We need transparency, accountability, and meaningful change, not just apologies." Her words resonated deeply, earning nods of agreement from both customers and remaining staff members. For the first time since entering the bank, Angela felt a sense of vindication, not for herself, but for everyone who had ever been wronged by institutions like Riverstone. Outside, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city skyline. Inside, the walls of Riverstone Bank echoed with the promise of justice. Angela Carter had ignited a reckoning, one that would ripple far beyond the confines of this single branch. The atmosphere inside Riverstone Bank had shifted from tense anticipation to outright dread. The legal and HR teams worked methodically, documenting every detail of the day's events while Diane Porter oversaw the proceedings with an ironclad resolve. Jonathan Prescott stood nearby, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, his expression unreadable but undeniably severe. Angela Carter, still calm and composed, observed it all from a distance. She knew this moment would define not only her leadership but also the future of Riverstone Bank. Today wasn't just about punishing those who had acted unjustly, it was about setting a precedent for accountability and change. Diane stepped forward, her voice slicing through the silence like a blade. "Jessica Turner, Mark Reynolds, Richard Evans, you are hereby terminated effective immediately," she announced, each word landing with deliberate weight. "Your actions today, and likely over years, have violated our core values and tarnished the trust our clients place in us." Jessica gasped, her face draining of color as if she'd been punched in the gut. "No, please, you can't do this," she pleaded, her voice cracking under the weight of panic. "I've worked so hard for this company. I've given everything." "You gave bias and prejudice," Angela interjected sharply, stepping closer. Her tone was firm but controlled, carrying the authority of someone who had endured far worse than what Jessica could imagine. You questioned my legitimacy because of how I looked. You treated Luis Ramirez like a criminal simply because of his name. You dismissed Sarah Jennings without even hearing her story. That's not working hard, that's perpetuating harm. Jessica opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. Instead, tears streamed down her cheeks as reality set in. She sank into a chair, defeated, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Mark Reynolds, ever the opportunist, tried a different approach. He cleared his throat, attempting to sound reasonable despite the sweat beading on his forehead. Look, Angela, Ms. Carter, this is all a misunderstanding. I was just following orders. If anything, it's Jessica's fault. She's the one who escalated things. Richard chimed in, his usual bravado replaced by sheer desperation. He's right, he exclaimed, pointing accusingly at Mark. And don't forget Beth. She called you in the first place. Why aren't you firing her too? Beth Simmons flinched visibly at the mention of her name, shrinking back against the wall. Her earlier confession had left her emotionally raw, and now Richard's attempt to shift blame onto her felt like another cruel blow. Tears welled up in her eyes, threatening to spill over. Angela turned to face Richard, her expression unyielding. Enough, she said firmly, silencing him mid-sentence. Scapegoating won't save you. Each of you played a role in this culture of discrimination, whether through action or complicity. And that ends today. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. As for Beth, Angela glanced toward the young teller, whose hands trembled as she clutched her clipboard. Yes, she flagged my withdrawal. But unlike the rest of you, she showed remorse. She admitted her mistakes and spoke truthfully about the systemic issues within this branch. That takes courage, a quality we value here far more than blind obedience. Beth looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. Was Angela really defending her? After everything that had happened? Beth Simmons, Angela continued, addressing the entire room, you will remain employed, but under strict probation. You'll undergo sensitivity training and work closely with HR to ensure these practices never happen again. Consider this your second chance. Beth nodded vigorously, tears streaming down her face, not of shame this time, but of gratitude. Thank you, Ms. Carter, she whispered, barely audible. I promise I'll do better. With Beth's fate decided, attention returned to the trio of disgraced employees. Security guards entered the lobby, their presence signaling the final act of this ordeal. One by one, Jessica, Mark, and Richard were escorted toward the exit, their protests growing increasingly desperate. I have a family to support. Mark shouted, struggling against the gentle yet firm grip of the guards. You can't throw me away like this. Please. Richard sobbed, his polished facade crumbling completely. I didn't mean any of it. I was just joking around. But Angela remained unmoved. She watched them leave without a trace of sympathy, knowing full well that their actions, or lack thereof, had consequences far beyond their own careers. As the glass doors swung shut behind them, the remaining staff let out a collective breath they hadn't realized they'd been holding. Once the chaos subsided, Angela addressed the group once more. This is a turning point for Riverstone Bank, she declared, her voice steady and resolute. What happened here today cannot be undone, but it can serve as a catalyst for change. Every employee, from entry-level to executive, will undergo mandatory diversity and inclusion training. We will implement new protocols to ensure fair treatment for all clients, regardless of race, gender, or socioeconomic status. And most importantly, we will hold ourselves accountable moving forward. Her words resonated deeply, earning nods of agreement from both staff and customers alike. For the first time in what felt like hours, there was a glimmer of hope in the air, a sense that something meaningful could emerge from this painful reckoning. As the evening drew to a close, Angela stepped outside, breathing in the cool night air. The city lights twinkled in the distance, a reminder of the countless lives touched by institutions like Riverstone Bank. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, change rarely was, but she also knew it was worth fighting for. For Angela Carter, this wasn't just about justice. It was about building a better future, one where everyone, regardless of who they were or where they came from, could walk into a bank and be treated with dignity and respect. The sun rose over Chicago, casting golden light through the towering glass windows of Riverstone Bank. It was a new day, literally and figuratively. Angela Carter stood in her corner office on the 30th floor, staring out at the sprawling cityscape below. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but one thing remained clear: today marked the beginning of a transformation that would ripple far beyond these walls. Angela turned away from the window, her gaze falling on the stack of documents neatly arranged on her desk. Each page represented a step toward systemic change, a blueprint for dismantling the biases and prejudices that had festered within Riverstone Bank for far too long. She picked up the top folder, its bold title emblazoned across the cover: Riverstone Reforms, Building an Equitable Future. She opened the folder, reviewing the initiatives she had drafted alongside Diane Porter and Jonathan Prescott late into the night. The first order of business was mandatory diversity training for every employee, from entry-level tellers to senior executives. But Angela knew that wasn't enough. Real change required more than just education, it demanded accountability. Her mind drifted back to previous board meetings, where discussions about equality often devolved into empty promises and vague platitudes. She remembered sitting silently as older, white male executives dismissed concerns about discrimination with dismissive waves of their hands. "It's not our problem," they'd say, or worse, "people are just being too sensitive." But Angela hadn't forgotten. Every instance of bias, every ignored complaint, it all fueled her determination to create lasting change. Now, armed with evidence of systemic wrongdoing and the full support of the board, she was ready to rewrite the narrative. Back in the present, Angela called a meeting with the remaining staff at the downtown branch. As they filed into the conference room, their expressions ranged from apprehension to cautious optimism. Angela stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding yet reassuring. "Today," she began, her voice steady and confident, "we start fresh. What happened yesterday was unacceptable, but it also gave us an opportunity to confront our flaws, to learn, and to grow. Starting now, Riverstone Bank will implement sweeping reforms to ensure no customer ever faces discrimination again." She paused, allowing her words to sink in before continuing. "First, we're introducing mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees. This isn't optional, it's essential. Understanding implicit bias and learning how to combat it is key to creating a welcoming environment for everyone." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Even Beth Simmons, seated near the back, nodded eagerly, determined to prove herself worthy of the second chance she'd been given. "Second," Angela continued, holding up a hand to emphasize the point, "we're launching an anonymous complaint system. Customers and employees alike will have a safe space to report incidents of bias or misconduct without fear of retaliation. Transparency is critical if we want to rebuild trust." Finally, she unveiled the centerpiece of the reforms: equitable banking standards. From this moment forward, every client, regardless of race, gender, or socioeconomic background, will receive the same level of service. No exceptions. To symbolize this commitment, I've invited 3 individuals who experienced discrimination at our hands to join us today. With that, Angela gestured toward the door, where Luis Ramirez, Sarah Jennings, and Ethan Collins, a young African-American entrepreneur who had previously been denied a loan based on prejudiced assumptions, entered the room. Their arrival sent a powerful message: Riverstone Bank was serious about making amends. Luis stepped forward first, his posture exuding quiet dignity. "When I came here last week, I felt like I had to fight for respect," he admitted, his voice tinged with emotion. "Today, I feel heard and valued." Sarah followed, clutching her daughter's hand tightly. "I never thought I'd walk into a bank and feel welcome," she said softly. "But seeing you take responsibility gives me hope, not just for myself, but for my child's future." Ethan closed the trio, his expression resolute. "This bank owes a lot of people apologies," he stated bluntly. "But actions speak louder than words. Show us that you mean what you say." Angela nodded solemnly, acknowledging the weight of their expectations. "You're right, Mr. Collins," she replied. "Words alone won't fix what's broken. That's why, moving forward, each of you will receive priority service, not as a favor, but as a symbol of our renewed commitment to fairness and equity." The room erupted into applause, a mix of relief and gratitude washing over everyone present. For the first time in years, Riverstone Bank felt like more than just a financial institution, it felt like a place of possibility. As the meeting concluded, Angela returned to her office, her heart heavy with both resolve and responsibility. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance, both internal and external, as she pushed for deeper cultural shifts within the organization. But she also knew she wasn't alone. Diane Porter joined her shortly after, carrying a cup of coffee. "You've done something extraordinary here, Angela," she said, placing the drink on the desk. "Not many CEOs would put themselves on the line like this." Angela smiled faintly, sipping the warm liquid. "It's not about me," she replied. "It's about proving that change is possible, even in places where it seems impossible. If we can transform Riverstone Bank, imagine what else we can do." Diane nodded, her eyes reflecting a shared vision. Together, they reviewed the rollout plan for the reforms, ensuring every detail was accounted for. By the end of the week, press releases would announce the changes to the public, accompanied by testimonials from Louise, Sarah, and Ethan. Social media campaigns would amplify their message, inviting feedback and fostering dialogue. That evening, as Angela left the building, she paused to look back at the illuminated sign above the entrance, Riverstone Bank, Empowering Futures. For so long, those words had been little more than marketing jargon. But now, thanks to her efforts, and the courage of those who dared to speak out, they carried real meaning. The streets of Chicago buzzed with life, a reminder of the countless stories waiting to be told. Angela walked briskly toward her car, her steps lighter than they had been in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, yes, but also new opportunities. For Angela Carter, this was only the beginning. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Riverstone Bank's downtown branch, casting a warm glow over the newly renovated lobby. The space felt different now, not just because of the fresh paint and updated decor, but because of the energy radiating from within. For the first time in years, it truly felt like a place where everyone belonged. Angela Carter stood at the center of it all, her presence commanding yet approachable. Today was a day for reflection, a moment to acknowledge how far they'd come and to inspire what lay ahead. Beside her stood Beth Simmons, who had been promoted to interim branch manager as part of Angela's efforts to foster redemption and growth. Beth's transformation had been nothing short of remarkable. Once hesitant and insecure, she now carried herself with quiet confidence, eager to prove that people could change when given the chance. "Are you ready?" Angela asked softly, turning to Beth with an encouraging smile. Beth nodded, though her hands trembled slightly around the clipboard she held. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, her voice tinged with nervous excitement. Angela placed a reassuring hand on Beth's shoulder. "You've earned this, Beth. Trust yourself." With that, Angela stepped onto the small stage set up in the lobby, where employees and customers alike had gathered for what promised to be a pivotal moment in Riverstone Bank's history. Cameras rolled discreetly in the background, capturing the event for promotional videos and social media campaigns designed to showcase the bank's commitment to equity and inclusion. Angela adjusted the microphone, her gaze sweeping across the room. Every face reflected a mix of anticipation and hope, qualities she intended to nurture moving forward. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady and resonant. "Today marks not just a new chapter for Riverstone Bank, but a renewed promise to our clients, our employees, and our community. What happened here recently was painful, not just for those directly affected, but for everyone who believes in fairness, dignity, and justice." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "For too long, institutions like ours have allowed biases, both overt and implicit, to shape the way we serve others. But no more. From this day forward, Riverstone Bank will stand as a beacon of equity. We will treat every customer with respect, regardless of their race, gender, or socioeconomic status. And we will hold ourselves accountable, not just in words, but in actions." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Luis Ramirez, Sarah Jennings, and Ethan Collins sat near the front, nodding along as Angela spoke. Their stories had become symbols of resilience and reform, proof that accountability could lead to meaningful change. "But let me be clear," Angela added, her tone firm yet compassionate. "This isn't about punishing mistakes, it's about learning from them. It's about creating systems that empower rather than exclude. It's about ensuring that everyone who walks through these doors feels seen, heard, and valued." Her eyes landed briefly on Beth, who stood nearby, listening intently. "Take Beth Simmons, for example," Angela continued. "When I walked into this bank weeks ago, Beth flagged my withdrawal request, a decision rooted in fear and flawed training. But instead of doubling down on bias, she chose honesty. She admitted her mistakes and helped expose the systemic issues plaguing this branch. That takes courage, and it's why I believe so strongly in giving second chances." Beth blushed under the unexpected praise, but the pride in her eyes was unmistakable. Angela turned back to the audience, her expression softening. "Each of us has the power to make a difference, to create a world where opportunity isn't determined by privilege or prejudice. Together, we can build something extraordinary." The room erupted into applause, the sound echoing off the marble floors and high ceilings. Angela stepped back from the podium, knowing she had planted seeds of inspiration that would continue to grow long after the event ended. As the gathering dispersed, the narrative shifted to glimpses of the future, moments that illustrated the lasting impact of Angela's leadership. In one scene, Angela sat across from a group of young black professionals at a sleek conference table. Her demeanor was warm yet authoritative as she shared advice on navigating corporate America. "Success isn't just about climbing the ladder," she told them. "It's about pulling others up with you. Never forget where you came from, or the barriers you had to overcome." One of the ments, a bright-eyed woman named Maya, leaned forward eagerly. "How did you stay strong when people doubted you?" she asked. Angela smiled knowingly. "By remembering that their doubts weren't about me, they were about them. You define your worth, not anyone else." Maya nodded, visibly inspired, while the others scribbled notes furiously. These sessions became a cornerstone of Angela's legacy, empowering a new generation of leaders to challenge the status quo. Years later, Riverstone Bank emerged as a trailblazer in equitable banking practices. News outlets hailed its innovative policies, from anonymous complaint systems to partnerships with minority-owned businesses. Customers raved about the personalized service they received, free from judgment or bias. In one testimonial, a young Latina entrepreneur named Sofia Martinez recounted her experience securing a loan to expand her eco-friendly clothing line. "I went to other banks, and they barely took me seriously," she said during an interview. "But Riverstone? They listened. They believed in me. And now, my business is thriving." Such stories became commonplace, cementing Riverstone Bank's reputation as a force for good in the financial industry. Meanwhile, Jessica Turner's life post-firing served as a sobering reminder of the consequences of unchecked bias. Unable to find stable employment in finance, she resorted to working odd jobs to make ends meet. In a rare candid moment, she admitted to a friend, "I thought I was untouchable, like my job title protected me from accountability. Turns out, it doesn't work that way." Her struggles underscored the importance of integrity and empathy in leadership, a lesson she learned too late. Back in the present, Angela stood outside the bank, watching as customers flowed in and out of the newly transformed space. The weight of responsibility still rested heavily on her shoulders, but it was a burden she embraced willingly. Change wasn't easy, but it was necessary, and she had proven that it was possible. As she climbed into her car, Angela glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back at her was tired but resolute, battle-scarred but unbroken. She started the engine and drove off, leaving behind the bustling streets of Chicago, but carrying with her the knowledge that she had sparked a revolution. For Angela Carter, the fight for justice was far from over. But today, she allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph. Tomorrow, there would be more battles to win, more lives to touch, and more futures to empower. At its core, this story is about more than just one woman's fight against systemic injustice. It's a powerful reminder that change begins when we confront uncomfortable truths, not just in the world around us, but within ourselves. Angela Carter's journey teaches us that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to act despite it. Her unwavering commitment to fairness and accountability shows us that even the most entrenched systems can be transformed if we have the will to challenge them. We also learn that redemption is possible, for individuals and institutions alike. Beth Simmons' growth from a hesitant employee complicit in bias to an empowered leader reminds us that second chances matter, but they must come with accountability. And Riverstone Bank's evolution into a model of equitable practices proves that businesses can thrive by doing what's right, not just what's profitable. But perhaps the most important takeaway is this: silence in the face of injustice perpetuates it. Whether you're a CEO or a customer, your voice has power. Speak up. Stand firm. Demand better, not just for yourself, but for those who may not have the platform to do so themselves. If this story resonated with you, if it inspired you, challenged you, or made you think differently, we invite you to join us on this journey of storytelling. Every week, we bring you narratives like these, stories of resilience, transformation, and hope. They're tales that reflect the complexities of our world while offering lessons we can all carry forward. Don't miss out on the next chapter. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when new content drops. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Together, let's keep the conversation going, and maybe, just maybe, inspire a little change along the way. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.